few just sort of housekeeping reminders. You all are on mute, but if you have any questions, feel free to use the question feature located in the control panel of GoToWebinar. You can ask questions throughout the webinar, and then we'll definitely have time at the very end to answer any questions. There are handouts for this presentation, and they're located in the handout section of the control panel. And then lastly, this webinar will be recorded, and so if any of your colleagues missed it, or if you want to refer to it later, we'll be sure to share the link on the SharePoint site, so that'll be available for you all. Okay, so today we're going to do a brief overview of Unit 2. We're going to discuss strategic planning as it relates to enrollment and access, and talk about what that can look like, different components for strategic planning, and we'll tie that into some of the data sources that we reviewed last unit. Then Stephanie is going to talk to us about best practices and considerations for enrollment and access plans. And then we'll wrap it up at the end and have time for questions. So you all know me, but I wanted to also introduce Stephanie. Stephanie is the pre-kindergarten coordinator for Pflugerville ISD. She provides program management as well as instructional support to the district's pre-K-4 program. She's worked within the field of early childhood education for over 25 years and has experience within both the private childcare sector as well as public education, having been a pre-K teacher, a kindergarten teacher, and an administrator. She understands the challenges of developing and maintaining a high-quality pre-K program. She's committed to building capacity and access within early care and education programs, as she believes participation in these programs is vital to the success of young children as well as their families. We're very excited to have her here today and can't wait to hear her guidance and best practices. Okay, so first we'll just do a quick little review of Unit 2 so that we can tie it into what we're learning this year and tie it into what Stephanie is going to review today. As you might recall, last month we reviewed potential data sources and how these data sources can inform decisions you make related to pre-K enrollment. So some of the sources we discussed included utilizing T-peer reports to look at your enrollment gap, conducting surveys with families, and that can involve surveying families who did not attend pre-K and you'd like to get a better understanding of why. So maybe you're surveying your kindergarten parents or surveying parents out in the community. Then we also discussed focus groups, utilizing a self-assessment to look at your program, and then utilizing any external data that might be available. And these data sources can be used to improve program design or enrollment strategies, to increase or diversify your outreach methods. I know some of you discussed trying new and different things like going out into the community to do some outreach, or advertising in new places, utilizing social media a little bit more. So those are some of the things that can be program decisions as well. And then lastly, it can also be used to help seek additional funding for your program. So now we're going to tie it all together and discuss how making a plan for your pre-kindergarten enrollment and access and how that should be data informed. So strategic planning is a systematic process that organizations use to envision a desired future. I really wanted to emphasize the systematic piece here and the process piece of that definition. Strategic planning allows you to be intentional, utilizing data you may have already collected to make thoughtful, informed decisions to help produce positive outcomes for children and families in your district. And the systematic piece that I just really wanted to talk about is that this allows you to be really intentional. So we talked about collecting data and using that data to help inform your plan so that you're not just flying by the seat of your pants or making decisions based on what you think might be best, but you have some data to help back that up. And then the process piece of this is that This is never ending. You can look at this every single year to try and look at good ways to help improve your enrollment processes and your registration. So your district might already have an overall strategic plan or an early childhood specific plan, but you may not have one that is specific to access and enrollment. Having one that's specific to access and enrollment will help you operationalize your goals and objectives related to enrollment. If you already have an early childhood plan, you could just incorporate these elements into a plan that you already have. This plan should be used internally and should be a living document. There's things that are changing frequently in everyone's communities. Families are moving in and out. There's high mobility rates. Your resources or your funding might be changing. So all of these things should be looked at every year to help inform what your plan is going to look like. And I do want to emphasize that having a plan is not a TEA requirement or anything like that. We just wanted to provide you with a tool and some ideas to help organize your thoughts and organize a plan with specific action steps and timelines to help you reach your goals that you all have been discussing this year. So enrollment and access plans can be comprised of a variety of components depending on your district needs. They can be long-term and or short-term. So you might have some goals that you want to accomplish this year, goals that you hope to accomplish in the next 5 years, and they should be looked at frequently and updated frequently, and then they should also be data informed. So the planning process should attempt to answer many questions when you're creating a plan. So who should be involved? What are you trying to address? What are you hoping to accomplish? What money, time, or expertise do you have available to help you reach your goals? Are there any challenges or constraints that'll prevent you from reaching those goals? Are there any backup plans or alternative methods that you could explore to help meet those objectives? What steps do you need to take? So specific action steps that you can assign to specific people with timelines. And then lastly, how are you going to define success for your program? Is there a certain percentage that you want to increase your enrollment or access by? Are you going to do a satisfaction survey with your staff or with parents on the registration process? There's different ways that you can help define success based on your needs and what you hope that looks like at your program. So I have some examples here, and these are the first two questions that were on that previous slide. So who should be involved in the planning process, and then what are the needs being addressed? And so everything listed here is not all-inclusive, so you don't have to have all of these in your plan or consider all of these in your plan, but rather these are just some examples. So you might want to involve early childhood staff, school administrators, finance, communications, public relations, data teams, web teams, community partners, and families. And you can pick and choose from those depending on how big your district is or what kind of staff your district has and what your goals and objectives are. And then some of the needs that you might want to address based on some of the data you've been collecting or the processes that you've been analyzing would include registration processes. I know some of you have said, you might have heard that inaccurate information might be is being provided to families, low enrollment, community awareness, or families' understanding of eligibility requirements. So you may want to pick some of those based on what you're seeing or any others that aren't listed here. And then you can create a plan with your team to help accomplish those goals and objectives. And sometimes, back to, in terms of who should be involved, sometimes that just means buy-in and not necessarily involvement in the plan. So I know many of you mentioned that you would like your communications department to have a bigger role in creating brochures or doing some outreach. And so it could be that you come up with a proposal and propose it to them and then just get their buy-in on what that looks like. Okay, so now I'm going to hand it over to Stephanie, who will review some considerations and best practices when creating pre-kindergarten enrollment and access plans.
Thank you, Cassie. Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here. I do want to do a little disclaimer. By no means am I an expert on enrollment. However, I am excited to share some strategies and best practices that I have implemented over the years and continue to learn on the job in my role as the pre-K coordinator for Pflugerville ISD. And I also look forward to being able to hear how each of you tackle the issue of enrollment within your districts a little bit later during our Q&A. So we broke this up into 4 areas: utilizing data, enrollment and registration processes, training and education of key personnel, and lessons learned. So we will jump into utilizing data. So the very first step is to take a close look at the current enrollment of your pre-K program as it is. It's important to know as much as possible about the current enrollment to know how to move forward with any enrollment plans. So kind of know what you're working with now before you can move forward. Some questions to consider are, is district-wide enrollment for the program in line with what was expected for the year? So with that, have all the seats been filled? If not, is there a pattern to the open seats? Are the open seats at a particular campus or in a particular area of the district? If it is a half-day program, is it a particular section that still has availability, whether it be in the morning or in the afternoon? After you've established the specifics with the current enrollment, potential enrollment can be looked at to determine the enrollment gap and the potential for growth within the program. The majority of our pre-K students qualify based on income or limited English proficiency. So a quick way to evaluate enrollment potential is to review kindergarten through 3rd grade trend data specific to students that qualify for free and reduced meals or students that are receiving bilingual dual language services. While this is only looking at 2 of the pre-K qualifiers, it can still provide a good indication of potential pre-K enrollment moving forward. As Cassie covered earlier, TPR reports can also be utilized to determine an enrollment gap. It should be noted that if you utilize different data resources, such as TPR or data within your district, there can be some variances. So just be aware of that. Cassie also mentioned utilizing surveys. I have found some success in surveying kindergarten students to find out where they were the previous year, whether they were within our district or were they with a different program. And that's also helpful, that data, because if you find that they are coming from other programs and they're within your community, it can identify potential for partnerships if you see that a good number of children are coming from a particular program. And even if it's not a true partnership where we're sharing teaching staff and children, there could be opportunities to join together for professional development, because the reality is that eventually those children become district children. And so I think the more professional resources that we can share within our community, the better. The next thing that we want to look at is the district and/or campus capacity. What is the overall capacity within the district for the pre-K program? Is there ability to grow using the existing structures that are readily available? So looking at the current pre-K serving campuses, is there capacity there? And if so, can you increase the number of classrooms at those campuses? Is there the ability to increase the number of pre-K serving locations if it's not, if pre-K is not currently being offered at all elementary campuses? And if that's the case, would it be a shift of existing classrooms from one campus to another, or would it be establishing new classrooms? That's an important distinction to make, especially when we're seeking approval from leadership, because one is just a shift and then one is creating a new classroom, which will incur some additional cost. And then, as I mentioned with the survey, is there potential to consider partnerships within the community with child care providers that provide care to 4-year-olds? Lastly, we want to think about our enrollment barriers. So once you know what your potential enrollment is, you have a number of students that you know that you're not capturing. So the question becomes, why are those families not enrolling in the program? This is another area where a survey could prove useful, allowing parents to share why they did not participate in the program. Oftentimes we have a good idea of what barriers exist through our work with the families. However, a survey may reveal some barriers that had not previously been considered. Some that have come to light for us are locations, whether the program is half day or full day, transportation, after school care, lack of awareness of the program, uncertainty of eligibility and whether or not they will qualify. Sometimes there's a reluctance to send children to school at age 4, and then program quality, which can include class size. So consideration of if a parent's going to send their child, what size group are they going to be a part of? So again, this is where that survey data could really prove useful, especially if we're presenting to leadership to request any changes within the program. So moving on to enrollment and registration processes. Pre-K is often a school district's first opportunity to engage young learners and their families. And in light of this, there should be a defined approach to outreach and recruitment, as well as the eligibility and registration processes. Cassie covered a lot of this about pre-K programs developing an annual outreach and recruitment plan that builds public awareness and community support while increasing student enrollment. It is true that districts should refine the plans based on program data collected each year, such that there can be continuous growth of the program. I've found in my experience that sometimes the demographics of the community will change from one year to the next. So you want to be mindful of that when you're looking at your plan. And when we're informing our community of the pre-K program, we want to be prepared to share what the program is, who qualifies and how, where is it? Is it at all elementary campuses or specific campuses within the district? How does it determine what campus a child will attend? And that's especially helpful when it's only at specific campuses within the district. And then when is it? Is it a half-day program or a full-day program? And if it, regardless of whether it's half-day or full-day, what are the times? When does it start? When does it end? The outreach tools contained within the pre-K enrollment toolkit resource are a great starting point. Why reinvent the wheel? The link to that resource will be shared a little later. We all live and operate in a world of technology, so one of the biggest things that we can do is strengthen our online presence. And so you'll want to think about, what does that mean in your district? Are you limited to the district website? Does your pre-K program have a page within the website that you have access to update as needed with information? Facebook, Twitter, email blast, text messages, and automated calls. And then we should never underestimate the power of word of mouth. The experience that other families have with the program will be one of the greatest assets in attaining new enrollment. Activities that directly and actively engage families tend to be the most successful in encouraging enrollment and attendance in the pre-K program. So things like a school tour, a preview day of the classroom and what the a snapshot of what the day might look like and some activities that the children will be participating in. However, it is recommended that these activities are limited to families that have been determined eligible for pre-K, so that we don't get anybody's hopes up. And then I think it's important to consider how families that are not currently connected to the district or school can be reached. Because a lot of what I've mentioned, whether it be sending out flyers or doing those email blasts, those are going to go to the families that are currently enrolled or somehow connected to the school. So how do we reach those families that are going to be brand new to our district and school? So then we jump into the different processes. Eligibility. Determining whether a child is eligible for pre-K is the first step that needs to occur before we move on to registration. I found separating eligibility from registration honors time and resources on both the part of the parent and the school. Because of the multiple qualifiers and the sensitivity of many of them, I have found using a screener form facilitates this process. This form, combined with the home language survey and the student residency questionnaire, can easily identify potential eligibility of a family in relatively short order. And then supporting documentation can be requested as needed based on the information indicated by the family within the screener.
And Stephanie shared the screener form with me, so we're going to review that on our PLC. But it's a great one-pager that the family fills out themselves, where they can indicate how they might qualify. That way, it, like Stephanie said, it opens the door, and you can ask, okay, I see that you are receiving TANF, or whatever the case may be, and then you can ask for those documents. So it kind of just alleviates some of the awkwardness that can sometimes happen when you're trying to figure out how a family qualifies. So Stephanie shared that with me, and we are going to review that on our PLC.
Okay, very good. So I don't have to go over eligibility with you. I think we all know it, live it, breathe it. But I think once you have that eligibility piece, then registration can occur, and then you can follow the procedures that are used for the campus. One thing that I think is important is to have consideration for children that are ineligible. It's inevitable that there are going to be children that aren't eligible for the program. And again, because we may be the first experience that a family has with the school district, we want to be mindful of how we handle these occurrences. Being connected to the community and having an awareness of other programs can be helpful. Consider creating a list of early childhood programs in the area to share with parents, in addition to information on school readiness. E3 Alliance has a school readiness parent guide in English and Spanish that could be an option. And then I think just reassuring parents if that, next year, if their child is going to be 5, they can come back to register for kindergarten. But we just want to honor their time and make sure that they have, even though they're not eligible for the program, that they're leaving with as positive an experience as possible. Because again, they will be coming back to us, hopefully the following year for kinder. So then we need to look at the training and education of key personnel. The best practice is to adopt an all hands on deck approach for registration. So considering all of the personnel that could potentially interact with families during the enrollment process, that's who needs to be informed of the process. I realize that this is easier said than done, and that we don't always have open access to a slew of people. However, let's consider when a school plans and organizes high school graduation ceremonies. It's not one person or one department. It is oftentimes the school as a whole, not to mention the community, that comes together to celebrate the student's educational journey. It would be beautiful if that same thing could occur when the students begin their journey through our schools. So I know I'm probably preaching to the choir with all of you, but I think if we kind of frame it that way, hopefully we can have more people join us in our efforts. Because we all know pre-K is its own creature with a multitude of eligibility criteria. So we just need to have as much support as possible. Concise step-by-step processes. This is so important. I think the least amount of room there is for interpretation, the better. I think whenever you are developing any forms or documents that you're going to use, to have someone from another department review those and just kind of run through the overall process with them and get their feedback and any questions they have, being able to answer those, because we don't want it to be, Cassie does it her way and then Stephanie does it my way. It needs to be a consistent process throughout all of the schools across the district, because it is a district program. So thinking about things when another language other than English is indicated on the home language survey, what is the process? Are there going to be testers on hand? Will appointments be made? What is the plan for LPACs? Who's going to verify student resident questionnaires if it indicates a family could possibly be McKinney-Vento? What forms and documents will be retained? What format? What order? All of this is really ringing true with me, because we've just recently done CUME folder audits, and with pre-K across 19 campuses, there was a lot of variance from campus to campus. So just having an overall level of consistency is important, which brings us to consistency. Requesting that the process is followed consistently for all families enrolling to ensure accuracy. And then again, that's just helpful from the district level, because when you are going from campus to campus, you can be assured that this is what you're going to find if you're checking folders, or what the experience a family may have had when registering. Having opportunity to practice, I think being able to role play, and I know that some of us really don't like that all the time, but being able to role play possible scenarios and have situations that would reflect qualifying and non-qualifying families. Check stubs. I think that if you can get a variety of check stubs for staff to practice with, to identify gross income versus net income, how to calculate multiple incomes within the same household. I wish that there was a very standard format of all check stubs, but I think we all know that that's not the case, and sometimes it's like you have to have a separate degree on knowing how to navigate and read them. So I think because that is such a big qualifier for our children, the more opportunity that staff have to interact with check stubs and practice what it looks like to calculate the income and determine whether a family is eligible, the better. And then finally, support systems. Who are the go-to people that can be available, whether it be on campus or a central office? Again, with pre-K just being such a unique program, there are always some one-off situations that you don't typically find will occur in other programs. And so who will be the person that signs off on that? And if that person is not readily available, what is the process so that we can get that family taken care of in a diligent manner? So making sure that everyone is aware of who those people are and how to contact them, and making sure that those people are aware that they are the go-to people and that they are ready and available to assist as needed. And then finally, just some lessons learned over my time, and some of this is repetitive. Conciseness. The more concise you can be with all of your processes, the less likely for errors. It just really is important to make sure that everybody is on the same page with the process. Consistency that follows suit with being concise. And all of these things take time. And so just consider that you're going to have to keep practicing and make sure that there is the ability for everyone to come together and practice and ask questions and work through those things. Considerations, I mentioned that a little bit earlier. Anytime there is one of those one-off situations that occurs, make note of it and how it's addressed in the event that it or something similar happens again, so that you know how it was handled previously and you can follow on that and not reinvent the wheel. I think just overall, just having an intentional plan and being flexible when we're working with our families. We've been put in the role to champion the needs of our youngest learners and their families, and it's a wonderful opportunity and responsibility that we have to those children and families. And I know that we all do our very best, and I hope that some of this was useful information.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. It was really great to hear those best practices and considerations, and I'm excited for us to talk about this a little bit more on our next PLC as well, as you all start thinking about your plans and thinking about what your processes might be. So just to wrap it up, when you're starting to think about your strategic plan, there's lots of different things that you can consider, such as the mission and vision of your department and your district, what your goals and objectives are, any data that you might have available, enrollment and registration processes, outreach and recruitment, any key players you want to involve, and lessons learned. And I do want to reiterate, like Stephanie said, that these things do take time. And I think for our cohort especially, things don't have to move super fast. You can pick, a certain thing that you want to focus on, something you want to improve on, and work on that. And then, try to work towards improving that each year. Because I know this takes a lot of time and effort, and a lot of resources and sometimes funding. So it's okay that sometimes you're taking it a little bit slow, while also trying to balance that with creating a good experience for the children and families on their first day and their first experience with the district. So we'll talk about this a little bit more on our PLC as well, and kind of think about what this can actually look like. I wanted to share a few different resources. One is a pre-K registration sample training, and this is more community-based, but I think the information is really great, and you could sort of take this model and apply it to something that you might do within the district. There's also our enrollment toolkit, which has a lot of great resources for your registration day. Like there's different flyers and different stations that you can set up with signs and things that are readily available for you. There's some flyers that you can take and customize as well as some information on just general best practices. And then lastly, if you want to dive a little bit deeper into strategic planning, I included a great guide on strategic planning that's from the Office of Head Start, and they've really broken it down of what different strategic planning processes can look like, what they should include, who should be involved. So that's a great resource for you there as well. Next steps, we're going to have our PLC. And if you have not already, utilize the link on this slide to pick a new date and time. Probably by the end of the day today, I'll go ahead and pick one based on what the majority has chosen. And then our next webinar in PLC will not be, for Unit 4, will not be until January. So we'll take a little bit of a break for December while everyone is on vacation and enjoying time at home. And we are going to change the topics a little bit, and we're going to dive deeper into enrollment processes, because I'm hearing from you all that that's definitely a topic you all want to explore. So we'll talk about that next. So now I just wanted to open it up for any questions that you all might have. Let's see. You can either type it into the question box, or I can unmute you if you want to raise your hand, and we can do it that way as well. I see a couple coming in so far. So one question was, do you know when TPEER will be updated? It's still as 16-17 as the most recent year. So I know that's something our department is looking into, so let me find out if they've received any update yet. I know that some 17-18 data is available, but it might not be the enrollment data. So I will look into that and get back to you all. And then we have another question from Susanna. She said, is it possible for all the districts involved in this cohort to share their eligibility form or what they use for registration? That would be helpful. And yes, I think that's a great idea. I'm definitely going to do that. I think for our next, if not our next PLC, then maybe the one in January when we're talking about enrollment processes more specifically. I'll share the form from Stephanie, and then I'll have all of you also send me your forms, and we can just kind of talk through them together. Are there any other questions about creating a plan or anything that Stephanie covered? Okay, well with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up the webinar. Thank you again so much for being here, and we will talk again soon on our PLC. I hope you have a great day. Thank you. Bye.